What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. The other day I did a video about the curfew yards, right? And in that video I talked about C facility in New Folsom and how C facility up until around 2000 it had a curfew. It was a 9-month curfew. Again, there was never any dropouts on that yard. It was just dudes were going over there from Southern California. Dudes were going over there and then just staying there. I don't know what they were doing, but 2001, getting out of the shoe, a bunch of us got sent down there from Pelican Bay, right? And from pretty much the like very year that New Folsom opened, C facility pretty much had been a stronghold for the Northerners. Like everybody knew, hey, they got it over there because there's nobody over there that's trying to do anything, right? And so it was well known that that was their spot. I remember it was 1996. I think it was 1996 when they just decided. No, it was 1995 when they moved on the Bulldogs, and the administration moved the Bulldogs that had been on C facility, put them all in that SIG, and then that's when I did a video about that. They eventually wound up coming out to B facility, where we were at, right? I was there. I remember when it was an older dude from Fresno approached the Llavero for the Southerners about them coming out, and and it wound up happening, right? And so from that point on, you had on C facility, you had the Northerners, and then you had every other faction, and then you had Southerners that weren't trying to program. Like these dudes legitimately, if a camarada landed on C facility, the Southerners that were there would let the Northerners know, hey, that dude right there is with the business. He's a threat to you guys. No, he wasn't a threat to the Northerners. He was a threat to the Southerners that were there, and they knew it, and they didn't want to fuck off their time. They wanted to continue to program, so they would feed them to the Northerners. That's what was happening. That's the kind of stuff that was going on over there, right? So, and this is something that, I've talked about a little bit before, and I kind of understand, but, there used to be more channels that were vatos from up north, right? And I always tripped out that they never told this story. To me, it's an interesting story, and that's why I'm going to tell it today. So, in the year 2000, I was still in the shoe. Well, part of it, I was in the shoe. Into 2001, part of obviously the beginning of 2000, I was in B yard in Pelican Bay. Then I went to the shoe, finished my shoe term off, came down in 2001, and but in the year 2000, and we heard about it up there in the Bay, right? There were whispers about it. The Northerners that were on C facility, they filed a lawsuit. They filed a lawsuit against the California Department of Corrections, specifically New Folsom. And they issued 14 commandments. The main thing was that they felt the administration was playing them, which they were. They were playing everybody. That's what CDC does. And they were saying that they are not allowed to just do their time, do their time, and go home, because the administration would put Southerners and whites on the yard with them and then create tensions that would lead to people catching shoe terms, catching more time, stuff like that, right? And so they were demanding that they be housed on a yard where there was no Southerners and no whites, so that they could do their time. Because they did that, it allowed, well, let me go back up a second. Because they filed that, the CDC had to make sure that they weren't going to yard with Southerners and whites so that they were in line with whatever was going on in court, right? So when I first got there, the Southerners, okay, the Southerners were in 7 and 8 block and 3 and 4. The Northerners were in 1 and 2 block and 5 and 6. And the Southerners would have regular yard, AM and PM yard, and then the Northerners, after the second yard went in, the Northerners would come out from 3 to 4 on the big yard. That lasted a little while, and then next thing you know, the administration moved all of the Northerners to the small side, which is on that yard is 5, 6, 7, and 8. They have no access to the big yard, and they moved all the Southerners to the big yard, which was 1, 2, 3, and 4 blocks, right? They also made it to where the Northerners would only get concrete yard, meaning the yard that's connected to their unit. It's a small, they call them shoe yards. They would go there. So they weren't mingling with the other buildings. It was their building only that was going to be on the little concrete yard with them, right? Their section, basically. And the crazy thing was, and I don't remember which side was wanting to come out, but once they moved them all to the small side, 5, 6, 7, and 8, there was a fracture between 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. 5 and 6 were at war with 7 and 8. They were all Northerners. And the issue was, 2 of the buildings wanted to come out and get busy with the Southerners. The other 2 buildings wanted, I'm not trying to say they were cowards, but they wanted to allow the court process to run its entirety. See what the courts do. And I remember the Southerners, we didn't understand it whatsoever. And because they couldn't get out of it, I don't know, they couldn't get out of the thing, and these dudes were like moving on each other. If they caught each other in medical, they were going to whack each other. And I could tell you, like, in all my time around Northerners, I've never heard them like get in a disagreement, like an event, argue with each other. You'll hear Southerners do that all the time. Southerners are always at each other. You know, it's different. But Northerners, I've never seen Northerners at odds. The only other time I did was A yard in Pelican Bay. I was there briefly, and then they kicked me over to B yard. And this was 1998, and this was when the Northerners, the last of the Northerners that were on B facility, got moved to A facility. And the Northerners on A facility were whacking all the ones that came from B yard because they were like, hey, you were over there with bulldogs. You didn't get down. You didn't handle your business. And they were whacking them, and it wasn't the case. Bulldogs and Northerners couldn't get to each other. There were times when they were jumping the fence to get to each other, trying to catch each other in medical, whatever. But I remember the Northerners were whacking their homies that were coming off of B yard, right? But that was a different thing than the C facility thing in New Folsom. You know, I was schooled. I told a story. It's an old story of when the Northerners lost their weight pile in New Folsom, and an incident. Well, it almost became an incident between the Northerners and the blacks. And my Sally was one of the main dudes on the yard, and he said, hey, I want 12 homies to come with me. Strap up. That's my Sally. Boom. I'm going with them. And we went down there to assist the Northerners, because the guys I was around on that yard, their whole thing was, hey, Raza touched Raza on this yard, period. Nobody else is going to touch them. If anybody touches Raza, even if it's the Northerners, we're getting into it. And so, you know, all these years later on C facility, I remember when the Northerners all got moved to the small side, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the Bloods immediately took over the northern area on the yard, their table. And I remember for a lot of the Southerners, especially the ones that knew what time it was like, damn, man, these dudes really lost everything on this yard. And I'm going to keep it 100% real. There were some of the blacks that were cool with me. I mentioned it before. And they would clown. They would tell me like, man, these fools, and they were talking about the Northerners. They're like, man, these dudes, they won't come out. We're burning them for their dope, and they're not doing anything. And I was like, the fuck? I ain't never met no Northerners like that, right? And I'm not telling these dudes. They're telling me what they're doing, that they're burning them for dope and that. And I remember we had a little junta, we had a meeting, the mesa, and we talked about it. And we agreed that we needed to do our part to encourage them, the Northerners, to just come out. Let's do what we got to do. But as Raza, we got to all be on the yard. Like having these guys brag about burning them and making fun of them because they weren't coming out to the yard was like, that's not cool. So I got one of the white Mac reps. I struck up the huila, the kite, and I said, look, I don't care whoever the main dude is for the Northerners. I don't need to know his name. I said, you know who he is? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, take this to him. And he did. And we were hoping, like, not that we wanted to get into it with them, but, you know, it's prison. Whatever's going to happen has to happen. But we did our part. We felt like, hey, get on out here. And nothing came of it. And it was crazy because we all knew, every one of us knew, they always had this yard sewed up. Whoever's decision that was a miscalculation. Because they never, ever wound up snatching that yard back up. I don't know what C facility is now. I've been out of prison so long. I don't keep up on that stuff. And hopefully if there's any of the channels from up north that are aware of this, that have knowledge about what really happened and how that was allowed to happen, they should do a video on it because they would have a better understanding. Me, I'm on the outside looking in, right? And we didn't understand it whatsoever. But anyways, to me, I felt like that was a unique story. I want to remind people, I've been on B facility in New Folsom and in A facility in Pelican Bay with Northerners. And I've never seen anything like what happened on C facility. The administration wasn't happy, I'll tell you that. They did not want Southerners on that yard because C facility they had the main kitchen, they had the main laundry, and the main laundry had contracts with outside hospitals to do all their laundry for them. And Southerners go on lockdown a lot. And when they have to assign Southerners to these spots and then the Southerners go on lockdown, they lose money. They can't fulfill their contract. They're late on their contracts. So, I don't know. That's my story for the day, though. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.